This perverted criminal was the mastermind of 49 arson cases. He had caused the death of 19 innocent people. In the most recent case, Jongju suffered third-degree burns. That was why Jongju's face was so horribly deformed. Recently, there had been more arson cases caused by some pervert, so Officer Hogay came to find Jongju because Hogay wanted to learn about the psychology of arsonists through Jongju. Jongju was very willing to cooperate, but Hogay had to pay Jongju with a box of matches. After getting what he wanted, Jongju was excited and took a deep breath to enjoy the scent of the match. According to Jongju, arsonists who killed people didn't feel guilty because the victims died because of fire. The arsonists must have been robbed of something important by the fire. That was why those criminals worshipped fire so much, because it destroyed everything without leaving anything behind. That was just like the emotions of people at that time. Those emotions were all excitement and happiness. Jongju slowly read the case documents. He predicted that the killer was very sophisticated because no one had understood the killer's message yet, so the next cases would definitely be bigger and the damage would be much worse. Furthermore, it was very likely that the killer had burns on his body because the killer had to have experienced extremely painful experiences to learn how to control fire effectively. Jongju thought that killer's target must be the firefighters. That way, no one would save the victims anymore. Jongju was excited while wiping his yellow teeth because he thought that police were being helpless against this series of arson. Then, Jongju lit a match and set fire to the wooden house. The unexpected incident shocked everyone because of Jongju's limitless madness. Hogay had just left the prison when another fire broke out. The police also caught the phone signal of the suspect. In Yu, both the police and the firefighters were present at the scene. They carefully approached the scene that was engulfed in flames. The suspect's car was also burning fiercely. The police and the firefighters' duty was to protect it too. The end, the police were determined to prioritize solving the case, so they immediately began the process of extinguishing the fire. Hogay was eager to approach the suspect, but at that moment, an explosion occurred with terrible destructive power. The explosion caused Hogay to slip and float in the air. The explosion also created a horrifying scene for all the rescue teams. Luckily, Dujin had attached a safety hook to Hogay beforehand. The two had promised each other that if they entered together, they would escape together. That promise helped Hogay save his life. Dujin shook the rope and called out Hogay's name. Dujin asked Hogay to wake up immediately so he could catch the suspect. In that dangerous moment, Hogay teased Dojin and told him not to worry about anything. This made Dojin both happy and worried, but unexpectedly, a cable wire caught fire. This caused Hogay to struggle once again. Dujin and Hogay reminded each other to be absolutely careful because if they were careless, they would immediately turn into charred pieces of meat. Hogay had intended to unhook the hook so that he would no longer be a burden, but Dojin did not allow Hogay to do that. Instead of Hogay sacrificing himself in vain like that, it would be much more reasonable for Hogay to release the oxygen tank to reduce his weight. Sure enough, after a few times of exerting all his strength, Hogay was able to cling to the wall. Even though Hogay burned his hand, he still felt lucky to be alive. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief when they saw Hogay and Dojin come back after completing the mission. Hogay thanked his teammates for helping him. He did not forget to return the hook to Dojin, but Dojin gave the hook back to Hogay because it was Hogay's talisman. Song Sol was extremely worried about Hogay's burn. She carefully performed first aid while Hogay's mind was only on work. He asked his teammates to immediately take In-Yu's car for an autopsy to find evidence. Something unexpected happened. There was a burned body in the trunk. Through fingerprint verification, it was the suspect In-Yu that the police were looking for, so the police were definitely fooled. In-Yu could not be the perpetrator of the series of arson. The mastermind had been hindering the fire department by setting fires every 3 hours, and now he was taunting the police by intentionally killing someone. According to the autopsy results, the victim's wrist was severely injured. The forensic doctor suspected that the victim was strangled by the cable, which meant that the victim had tried his best to escape. There was a lot of black residue and soot in the bronchi. The same was true in the mouth and nose. All of these signs proved that the victim was indeed alive when the fire broke out. Dujin's conscience was filled with guilt because he thought he had been slow and careless in not checking the scene of the fire carefully. Meanwhile, Hogay did not forget to make a request. He told the forensic doctor to check if there were any sleeping pills in the victim's internal organs. Hogay encouraged Dojin not to blame himself because the victim had been tied up and locked up so tightly. What else could they have done? However, Dojin was a firefighter and had gotten out before the victim. That also meant that Dojin had failed in his duty. Hogay was very curious. If Dojin thought so, then who had been the one who had rushed in to save the last remaining firefighter in the fire? Dojin said that the firefighters had to get out on their own. They were just like the police. No one helped them when they had to confront and chase dangerous criminals. Hogay returned to investigate. He felt something was wrong. Why had the culprit killed Inyu when he had meticulously turned Inyu into a criminal to take the blame for him? Hogay searched the file carefully and found out something surprising. Inyu had been the one who had blocked the police force on Hogay's first day working there. Hogay remembered what Jongju had shared. The killer had a very close connection with the firefighters. Lawyer Jang had mocked Chief Prosecutor Chun Dong because Chun Dong had just been appointed as the chief prosecutor. That meant he would be close to his son Hogay. But Lawyer Jang had immediately been countered by Chun Dong, who said that Lawyer Jang would not be able to take all the 34 billion won he had received from the mastermind to help him turn his suicide into a murder. But as a professional lawyer, Lawyer John had also soon discovered the bad things that Chun Dong had done during his long term as chief prosecutor. So Lawyer Jang was very confident. The police and rescue team returned to the parking lot where the fire broke out. There they found a cut in the hydraulic cylinder. They suspected that this was the first point of ignition, but aren't hydraulic pipes always subject to strict quality regulations, and it's very difficult to break them. Dujin returned home after a hard day's work. He remembered that he hadn't had time to give Song Sol a ring, and he had missed the chance to confess because of a surprise mission. Just in time, Song Sol also came to ask Dojin to have dinner together, so Dojin mustered up all his courage to confess his feelings. However, the crowd suddenly approached and talked and laughed happily. This caused Dojin to miss his fate once again. As soon as Hogay and Dojin met again, they both rushed to take the blame upon themselves. Dojin thought he was late and didn't check the vital signs carefully. Hogay blamed himself for misidentifying the culprit. The stubbornness of the two made Song Sol helpless. She advised them to do their best so that there would be no more victims. The delivery man was in such a hurry that he spilled all the soup in the elevator. He quickly apologized and contacted the restaurant owner, but he was scolded for being careless. The restaurant owner was also forced to compensate the delivery man. He was helpless and used the remaining food to overcome his hunger, but he was ridiculed by his daughter's friends. The security guard forced him to clean up before he could leave. It was true that poor people always have bad luck. At the same time, the rescue team began experimenting with various tools. They finally discovered the tool the killer used to cut the hydraulic pipe. The test results here also showed that there were sleeping pills and anesthetics in Inyu's stomach. That was exactly what Hogay had predicted. In other words, even if Inyu had been discovered right away, he would have had no chance of surviving because the tool was extremely expensive and strictly controlled. There was only one company that had the exclusive right to distribute it. However, this place had reported a theft involving the tool, so they contacted the local police station. The police caught a glimpse of the suspect. He was extremely careful, always wearing a mask and covering himself up. The police also lost track because there were too few security cameras in the area. In an underground shopping complex, the owner smelled the smell of oil stronger than usual, but he didn't care and went to eat with his employees. The police recreated that route. They discovered many barrels of oil piled up there. The police continued to investigate and found out that the oil had been stolen by part-time employees. The owner called the police, but they couldn't catch the oil thief because he was using a fake name. Hogay rummaged through the remaining items. He found the uniforms mixed together. The common point was that they were all from places where fires had occurred. There was only one place that hadn't caught fire yet, the shopping mall. But the police discovered this too late. At the same time, a fire started to break out in the kitchen. Everyone tried to use fire extinguishers, but it was useless. The explosion started to get louder. Others hurriedly evacuated. The boss and the delivery man also rushed out. The alarm went off again, but there were two fires at the same time. The rescue team had to split up to deal with the situation. They quickly arrived at the scene and took the survivors out of danger. The first was the owner. Song Sol put on a gas mask and asked her subordinates to take the owner out. The owner said there were still people inside, so Song Sol took the risk of going inside before reinforcements arrived. She finally found the delivery man. At that moment, the floor began to crack. The reinforcements had just arrived. That was when the building collapsed and Song Sol was still trapped inside. On the other side, Dujin also hurriedly broke the glass door of the car blocking the water hydrant. Then the whole team began the rescue process. When they heard that there were firefighters buried in the rubble, the authorities became even more urgent. They immediately requested reinforcements. Inside, Song Sol woke up. She tried to contact the rescue team, but the radio was broken and the signal was lost. Thanks to the groans, Song Sol was able to reach the delivery man. However, his leg was crushed by a concrete block and he was losing a lot of blood. Ho-un, the commander in charge of the direction, Res, was present too. to grasp the situation. Although the police also wanted to participate in the evacuation, Ho-un ordered that no one except the firefighters were allowed to enter. To determine the location of the victim, they deployed forces and used sound detection equipment. Hogay received the news and quickly accelerated. While the rescue team was also rushing to install the equipment, Song-sol used fire to burn iron chopsticks to stop the bleeding from Mr. Do-yoon. Despite the man screaming for fear of infection, Song-sol had no other solution in this situation. As soon as she started, he gritted his teeth and endured the pain. Thanks to that, the rescue team discovered the sound. They were bringing in a GA detector before they started going deeper into the scene. However, it gave off a gas leak warning signal. This put the rescue team in a difficult position. If there was no way in, the rescue team would have to break concrete. That would create sparks and cause another explosion. This could endanger the lives of the victims below. Inside, Song-sol thought the wound was fine, but the wound was not simple as the broken bone kept stabbing into the blood vessels. Song-sol had to stretch to remove the broken bone, but she did not have any first aid equipment on hand, so she had to use a kitchen utensil. Song-sol also asked about the delivery man's family. Then she advised him to think of his daughter and try hard. But the delivery man wanted to die so that his daughter Nari could receive good social benefits. The delivery man blamed himself for being a bad father because he couldn't provide a good life for his daughter. Even so, Song-sol started disinfecting. She promised to do her best to save him. The delivery man clenched his teeth in pain. Song-sol performed the first aid perfectly. Song-sol then quickly fixed the delivery man's wound. After checking the situation, she knew that there wasn't enough air for two people to breathe for another 5 minutes. So Song-sol decided to give the gas mask to the delivery man. At this time, Song-sol was also exhausted and collapsed beside. Nari panicked when she learned that her father might be trapped in the building. She rushed out to block the car and went to the scene with the police. They were waiting for the nitrogen truck. The commander still asked to wait for orders, making Hogay extremely angry. He didn't understand why the commander could still be calm when there were still people trapped below. At this moment, Nari arrived. She confirmed that the helmet with the cat on it was her father's. Nari earnestly asked everyone to save her father. Nari's father woke up from the pain. He did everything he could to make a sound, hoping someone would hear, but there was no response. Song-sol was in a coma, but at this moment, she still remembered the promise she made to Do-jin. Hogay couldn't wait any longer. He carried an oxygen tank and decided to risk his life and rush in. That's why a firefighter realized that if he used many oxygen tanks at the same time, he would create enough pressure that could create a saturation for the poisonous gas. That was the perfect solution to keep the victim alive. Everyone quickly coordinated to do it. Of course, Hogay also joined in the rescue. They released oxygen while praying that the gas would decrease. After releasing oxygen many times, the rescue team was happy to see that the index was safe. Now they could go deeper inside. The rescue team used specialized equipment to break through. They created a small path to get the victim out. The endoscope recorded a blurry image in the basement. Finally, it was Hogay who had a sharp eye to discover something suspicious. It wasn't just a simple object. It was Nari's father. On this side, Do-jin also finished the rescue work for another fire. He was preparing to go to help with the rescue. At this time, he just knew that Song-sol was in critical condition because she was buried under the building. Just as Do-jin was about to leave, a group of children ran over crying. The children begged Do-jin to save their friend who was missing in this building. Do-jin was forced to make a decision in this difficult situation. He remembered how he used to play happily with his friends, but then the fire suddenly broke out, making him panic, so he decided to put his feelings aside. Do-jin carried oxygen and insisted that he would save the boy's friend. He discovered a shoe lying on the floor. Do-jin searched every corner and called out the boy's name loudly, but the sounds like drums were heard. That sound signaled that an explosion could happen at any moment. Do-jin became more anxious. Luckily, he found Unhyuk hiding in the refrigerator. Do-jin hurriedly gave the boy his shoes and let him out, but the boy cried in fear. Unhyuk refused to go out because he was afraid of the fire. On this side, the rescue team found 2 victims. While Nari's father was fortunately still conscious, Song-sol was unconscious. The rescue team used a stretcher to carry the victim out, but it was not easy because the terrain was small and rough. In addition, this building could collapse at any time, so the rescue team had to be extremely careful. Unfortunately, the stretcher carrying Song-sol out got stuck. Hogay did not hesitate and jumped in directly. He used all his skills and strength to save Song-sol. In the end, this recklessness paid off. The rescue team brought the victim out safely. Everyone was extremely happy, especially little Nari. When she saw that her father was still safe and sound, Nari worriedly asked her father to never accept deliveries in places like this again. Song-sol was also put in the ambulance right after that. Hogay also got in the car to take Song-sol to the hospital. On the other side, Do-jin persistently convinced the boy that he was a firefighter. He would definitely protect Un-hyuk's safety. Luckily, the boy listened to Do-jin. However, as soon as the two of them went out, the fire flared up again fiercely. Do-jin was forced to give up his protective gear to the boy. He carefully carried the boy through the dangerous curtain of fire to the window frame, and Do-jin carefully released the cable for Un-hyuk to escape. In the blink of an eye, the boy landed safely and reunited with his friends. Now, as long as Do-jin got out, everyone would be safe. It was at this moment that he saw the strange red star. It was exactly the same as what he saw at the previous fire. There was definitely something fishy about it. Song-sol was facing death. Hogay tried CPR several times, but she didn't respond. The fire department thought the fire was out, but it flared up again stubbornly, so they rushed to put it out. After arriving at the hospital, Hogay also rushed to the scene to support Do-jin. He was also facing danger while trying to find clues. Do-jin accidentally fell from above. After the pain, Do-jin tried to get up. He remembered Song-sol's reminder to take care of himself. Do-jin had put the engagement ring on his hand before the mission. He couldn't collapse here. He had to go back to put the ring on Song-sol's hand. With the strength of his belief, Do-jin slowly walked out first. He couldn't believe that the terrible power of the fire had created a shocking explosion. The firefighters also collapsed while the building was fighting the raging flames. From afar, someone was calmly watching the heartbreaking scene. He even confirmed that this was the last time he would participate in such a mission. Fortunately, the rescue team was safe, but they discovered a figure in the hazy smoke, so they immediately ran inside to rescue them. After all the dangers, Do-jin finally met Song-sol. He was extremely worried when he saw that she was still unconscious. At that moment, she moved her hand slightly. Song-sol even smiled brightly when she saw Do-jin appear beside her. Song-sol even blamed Do-jin for waiting for him for so long. Song-sol thought that she would never have the chance to see Do-jin again. Now Do-jin could breathe a sigh of relief. He also wanted to ask her for one more favor. Do-jin gave Song-sol the ring that he had kept for a long time. Song-sol also did not expect that the ring would fit her finger so well. It turned out that Do-jin had secretly measured the size of Song-sol's finger while she was sleeping. Do-jin said that he was afraid of going near fire these days, not because he was afraid of dying, but because he was afraid that he would never see Song-sol again. Hogay finally arrived at the scene. Fortunately, only one firefighter was slightly injured. Part of the building had collapsed due to the explosion. The rest was also burned down. Perhaps the culprit did this to destroy evidence. It was only then that they discovered that someone was trapped there. Hogay personally came to check the identity. On this side, Do-jin was apologizing to Song-sol for not returning safely. This sentence surprised both Song-sol and everyone else. Unfortunately, the person under the blanket was Do-jin. He could not escape the fire. At that moment, Song-sol's vital signs also continuously rang out. Anna, Do-jin's younger sister, could no longer stand. Everyone was shocked and sobbing. Song-sol was temporarily safe, but she was still in a deep coma. Hogay visited Song-sol with a dazed face. He folded an unfinished paper crane for her and left. Hogay felt that instead of being depressed like this, he should find the culprit to avenge Do-jin. Both fires happened at 1:30 a.m. There was a high chance that the culprit had an accomplice. The arsonist then killed people. His only target was the firefighter. Anna brought Do-jin's mask to the police. She confirmed that there was still oxygen in it. So why did Do-jin take off his mask? Could it be that there were other people at the scene? Ki-sol was not calm enough to stay in the hospital. He immediately returned to work and announced the important news that before Do-jin went deep into the fire, he saw the burning star symbol. That was enough to know that this was not simply an accident. The forensics had to perform an autopsy because that was the only evidence. Although it was heartbreaking, everyone had to accept it. No one wanted to go through that moment of extreme pain. Junhong felt extremely heartbroken when she saw Do-jin's name on the report because she had previously offered him a transfer to the forensics department, but Do-jin had refused. Hogay stared at the hook Do-jin gave him. He treated it as his talisman. After the forensic doctor cut open Do-jin's stomach, they found many unidentified white foreign objects. If it was stuck in the esophagus, it must have been inserted into the body right before Do-jin died. In the end, forensic doctor Junhong wanted to sew Do-jin's body herself. She didn't forget to ask everyone to go outside. Junhong took care of each stitch and then carefully wiped Do-jin's face. And then Junhong couldn't hold back her tears of pity. She apologized for putting the knife on Do-jin's body. The police and rescue team performed a solemn ceremony to send Do-jin to his final resting place. A mournful atmosphere filled the air. The moment the coffin was about to be placed in the crematorium made even the toughest people unable to hold back their tears. On this side, Song-sol's hand with the ring also moved slightly. Fortunately, Song-sol woke up at this moment of farewell, but the fact that Do-jin died was too painful for Song-sol. They clearly promised to return safely together, but now the two of them could never meet again. Time passed, but the rescue team never forgot an exemplary and enthusiastic captain like Do-jin. They still gave Do-jin a meal, as if he was still with them. Song-sol cleaned Do-jin's personal locker. She remembered that when she first joined the rescue team, she received valuable experiences from Do-jin. Do-jin also cared for Song-sol very much. Song-sol discovered a will in the book. This was a rule of the fire department. Anyone who worked for more than a month had to prepare for this heartbreaking thing, because if they died, their colleagues would find the will and deliver it to someone important. Do-jin not only left a letter for his family, but he also wrote a personal letter for Song-sol. Song-sol cried just reading the first few lines. Do-jin said that if Song-sol read this letter, she would be lucky. At least, she wouldn't be caught in the fire like him. As expected, Do-jin always thought about Song-sol's safety before his own life. This made Song-sol feel extremely heartbroken. The forensics finally determined that the strange white object was a candle. How the murderer managed to get the candle in Do-jin's stomach was still a mystery that they needed to find out. The police also found new clues after the investigation. They discovered that a stranger had appeared at the scene 30 minutes before the fire broke out. It was highly likely that this was the arsonist. On this side, the tycoon Tae-oa was escorted by the prison guards to see his deceased father. He showed remorse. Tae-oa promised to become a good person after being released from prison. He was also in pain because he had no other relatives in this world except for lawyer John. Tae-oa hugged him tightly in surprise. After that, he voluntarily put his hands in handcuffs with an extremely unpredictable face. On the way back, Tae-oa pretended to have a stomachache to go to the bathroom. He didn't hesitate to put his hand in the toilet. It turned out that lawyer John had planned this for Tae-oa beforehand. Lawyer John instructed him on how to escape the police siege by taking a hidden medicine. As soon as he finished taking it, Tae-oa was immediately rushed to the emergency room due to acute kidney failure. Song-sol carefully entered the scene of the fire. Unexpectedly, Jun-hong was also there. She wanted to reenact case. Obviously, a normal person's mentality would leave right after starting a fire. So why was there a second explosion on the opposite side just an hour later? Then the murderer must have had a purpose. They needed to determine the source of the fire first. It was highly likely that the source of the fire was this candle. Based on the material and size, the culprit can completely control the burning time and the timing of the fire. At that moment, Anna also appeared to help because she was imbued with Do-jin's ideology. They had to simulate the case to find the truth. Hogay announced that the police had found the suspect's phone signal 2 weeks before the first case. They even took a picture of him 30 minutes before the last arson. Surprisingly, that person was the station chief. This shocked everyone, but obviously no one thought that the station chief was the culprit. On this side, the three girls worked very well together. They carefully determined the candle materials and the melting point of each type. Then they coordinated with the fire department to start lighting the fire. Everyone increased the temperature and monitored the burning process of each type. That was also when they realized something important. The fuel tank must also be fireproof to be able to wait for the candle to burn for an hour. But there was no trace of it at the scene, which proved that the fuel tank was a special type. In the end, only paraffin was left. As soon as it burned out and fell onto the gas tank, it exploded immediately. This was exactly what they had simulated. Jun-hong determined that it could only be a military gasoline can made of a special material. Only it was suitable for use in a situation where the fire was hidden. Song-sol had already imagined the situation that Do-jin had faced in the fire. Do-jin must have guessed that the candles were used to control the ignition time. However, at that moment, the fire on the opposite side suddenly flared up. The fire brigade rushed in again. If Do-jin didn't extinguish those candles, they would die together, so he tried his best to extinguish it as soon as possible. But the exit was engulfed in flames. Do-jin had no choice but to sacrifice his life. He took off his oxygen mask. He tried to eat all the candles with the hope of keeping the evidence in the safest place, which was Do-jin's body. Song-sol felt extremely heartbroken when he imagined that scene. After all, that situation wasn't murder or an accident, but it was simply the noble choice of a firefighter. Do-jin did it to save the lives of his other colleagues. On this side, Station Chief Duck-gu also reported that he just happened to go there to retrieve the forgotten things of her late mother-in-law, because she happened to live there too. Song-sol went to present everything they had just discovered at the scene to clear the station chief's name. On this side, the stranger was sitting next to Do-jin's grave. He recalled the scene. While happily celebrating his birthday with his friends, a fire suddenly broke out. Even though Do-ha called out Do-jin's name, Do-jin cowardly turned away, so Do-ha's face was full of resentment. He was also an officer. Do-ha reported that the recent fires were related to missing military gas tanks, but his superiors immediately denied it. But what Do-ha said was true. There there was a stranger who was transporting a large number of candles and gas tanks along with that familiar star. Using professional methods, Jung-ho analyzed each component in detail. She finally found the address of the production site of the candles and military gas tanks. Hogay recalled that Do-jin and Hogay had both had a crush on Song-sol. They even competed with each other fairly, and Do-jin also did not hesitate to express his intention to confess to Song-sol. But before Do-jin could do that, he died in the fire. So Hogay replaced Do-jin to put this meaningful ring on Song-sol's hand while Song-sol was still in a coma. On this side, Song-sol also brought the remaining personal belongings to Do-jin's house. She quietly looked at the memorable photos, and suddenly Song-sol saw an extremely familiar character whose name she could not remember. Since the killer was a large order customer, it was not difficult to find his identity and address. But there was one very surprising thing. The place where the killer was staying was the villa where the first arson incident occurred, and the buyer was Sang-man. He was also the person Song-sol had saved in the fire. He was on his way to the new location. That was Do-jin's private residence. Song-sol was startled when she saw him. She realized that Sang-man was the person in the photo. Song-sol thought he had left, so she quickly called Hogay to inform him. However, Sang-man saw the photo and immediately turned around. He was holding an iron hammer in his hand. Sang-man hit Song-sol on the head with the hammer. Then he dragged her body away. It was unbelievable that the owner of the house turned out to be the one who started the fire and even ended up getting injured. It seemed that Sang-man knew the station chief, so Sang-man made an appointment to meet the station chief at the place where his life with the stars ended. The station chief heard about it and rushed there. The police investigated her background and found out that Sang-man was the station chief's ex-husband. Moreover, he was also a firefighter. That's why he knew the route firefighters took when putting out the fire. Sang-man also had a criminal record for attacking civilians' homes, so the police had to be really careful. Not only that, the factory owner also informed the police. Sang-man ordered a large number of large candles that burned for up to 8 hours. Sang-man did not use a cell phone registered under his name, so the police could not determine Sang-man's current location. At the same time, Sang-man was holding a memorial service for his deceased colleagues. These were people who had heroically sacrificed themselves in dangerous firefighting incidents. Hogay decided to go to Sang-man's house again to look for clues. He finally discovered his plan. Through the evidence here, it was possible to see exactly 7 places that had been burned. There was only one arson case left. That place was the next office building. That was also the place where Sang-man had arranged to meet with the station chief. Back to that day, 10 years ago, Sang-man and the station chief had participated in a large fire in the slum. They had tried to both get people out safely and protect their own lives. Sang-man had been the one who had directed his colleagues to put out the fire from the roof. Although he had warned everyone to be careful because the house was prone to collapse, no one had expected such an incident to happen. 4 of Sang-man's colleagues had been gone forever. That had made everyone heartbroken. Back in the present, Sang-man confessed that he had been the one who had started the series of fires. Every time, he had left a star symbol that no one had noticed. The station chief went from surprise to hatred. How could he have considered the moment the fire broke out as precious? At that time, the alarm was transmitted to the rescue team. The police, medics, and firefighters immediately approached the scene. They set off. Everyone did not forget to pray to Do-jin to bless them. The reason Sang-man had killed In-yu was because In-yu had ordered his subordinates to destroy the memorial service for Sang-man's fallen colleagues. In-yu was also the one who had deliberately set the fire to expel the current residents from the slum. In-yu had done this to resettle the area. Before Sang-man could do anything to In-yu, In-yu had falsified the injury records and had sued Sang-man. That had forced Sang-man to quit his job. The lives of the deceased had only been worth 50,000 won. Even though they had worked very hard, this truth had been very bitter. Sang-man could only avenge his teammates to make up for his mistakes, because it had been Sang-man who had caused his colleagues to die in the fire. Even though the truth was so cruel, how could a firefighter have set fire? It was also because of Sang-man's stupid actions that a passionate firefighter like Do-jin had to lie forever in the sea of fire. Sang-man was extremely heartbroken when that good soldier had rushed into the fire like a fool. Do-jin was exactly like Sang-man had been 10 years ago. But in the end, what was the meaning of that sacrifice when life was still the same? Heroes like Do-jin would soon be forgotten. It was really a waste of effort. That was why Sang-man had to set fire to each case so that everyone would remember. The authorities were present at that location. But suddenly, Do-ha appeared as the commander of the explosives handling department. They had wanted to chase the thief of the high-power detonator at quarry. It turned out that the case at the car tower had simply been about following the suspect. Because Do-ha had not been authorized authorized by his superiors. He affirmed that this was the last case he would participate in. That day, they had located the detonator right there. The sensor had given a signal, which meant it had been activated. This detonator would definitely cause great consequences. The station chief begged Sangman to stop, but he even wanted to kill Song-sul so that she could feel what Sangman had gone through when he had lost his precious comrade. Sangman also wanted the station chief to put out the fire. She had to rise to become a member of the fire department to help firefighters not risk their lives anymore. But the station chief sarcastically called Sangman a monster. She suggested that Sangman kill her instead of taking the lives of innocent people. Hearing this, Sangman immediately stabbed the station chief, causing blood to flow non-stop. The rescue team knocked on every door of every house, urgently asking everyone to evacuate. The rescue team wanted to make sure no one was left behind. They did not forget to carefully check every corner to probe and search for the source of the fire. Hogay discovered that Sangman had started his plan at 6 p.m. when he broke the security camera here, because he had set the 8 hours burning candle. The police and the rescue team only had 30 minutes left to deal with it. To cause the most damage, Sangman would definitely use the stacking effect. He started from the highest point of the elevator, which coincidentally was the broken elevator on the 8th floor. Hogay and his teammates immediately moved there. They discovered that Song-sul was trapped inside. She quickly reported the situation inside. Although Hogay was in a mess, he remained calm to judge the situation. The rooftop of the building was extremely suspicious. Hogay asked Mungbin to stay here next to Song-sul, and Hogay immediately moved to the rooftop with a fire extinguisher in hand. Doha opened the elevator door and started the bomb detection process. But Sangman was not an unprofessional person, because he installed it very professionally. Even a slight vibration that caused an imbalance could trigger the detonator. The countdown clock was only a little over 4 minutes left. Song-sul asked everyone to evacuate quickly. Doha also considered it a reasonable choice. He ordered everyone to get the people out of this area, and Doha himself would try to get Song-sul out. Although Mungbin and the rescue team did not want to leave when their colleagues were in danger, they had to obey the order. Song-sul carefully described to Doha. He tried to approach calmly and carefully. Finally, Hogay found the station chief. He quickly gave her first aid. Meanwhile, Sangman was pouring gasoline on himself. There was little time left. Doha took off his protective gear. He tried again. Doha carefully pulled out the detonator cord. He was shaking with the scissors in his hand. Doha also asked Song-sul what color she liked in a dangerous moment. Song-sul replied that it was fine as long as it wasn't the blood red she usually saw. Luckily, Mungbin had run to the rooftop. Hogay called out to him to take his place. Then, Hogay went straight to Sangman and gave him a punch filled with resentment. Next, Hogay rushed to extinguish the candles to ruin Sangman's plan. Song-sul closed her eyes and waited for the end. Sangman recklessly lit a lighter and set herself on fire. On the other side, Doha was also determined to cut the rope. Fortunately, Hogay finally took action to deal with Sangman in time. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. They shouted in excitement when all the danger was really over. The trial took place. Sangman remained silent and unrepentant. Meanwhile, he was prosecuted for many crimes, from theft, murder to arson. The prosecution recommended the highest sentence, the death penalty, for Sangman. Before Sangman was executed, the station chief did not forget to remind him Dujin's sacrifice was not in vain. The children he saved still remembered that noble act. This answer made Sangman collapse and cry in sorrow. Even though he completed the mission, Doha was still disciplined, so he decided to leave this job. Before leaving, Doha did not forget to tell his subordinates to take care of their health. Doha also asked them to help him throw away the remaining personal belongings. Hogay took the hook that saved his life to say goodbye to Dojin. After that, he went to see Song-sul. She knew that Hogay was the one who put this ring on her hand. Ever since Hogay transferred here, Song-sul was completely attracted to him. She had to restrain herself a lot. But now Song-sul did not know what to do when the feeling of guilt towards Dojin kept rising in her heart. Hogay also understood Song-sul's feelings, but Hogay had to admit that he had found someone he loved. That person was sitting next to Hogay. She even shed tears because of another man. Hogay really wanted to beat that bastard up and asked him not to make Song-sul cry anymore. But Hogay himself could not do anything. After saying that, Hogay also said goodbye with a promise to return soon. Meanwhile, Song-sul covered her face and cried in despair. The grandmother and granddaughter took turns teasing and criticizing the guard for not completing his duty. Afterwards, the grandmother happily said goodbye to her granddaughter for school when she returned home and was shocked to find a mysterious black bag hanging in front of the door. Inside was the body of Jung's son, her missing cat. Coincidentally, she was Mungbin's neighbor. Mungbin listened carefully to her explanation and protected the evidence under the cat's paws by tying up cat's legs. Mungbin asked if she had had any conflicts with anyone recently, but she changed the subject and didn't answer the question. She just reminded Mung Bin to return the food boxes she had given him. Now Mung Bin had the chance to enter the examination room. He performed the procedure like a professional forensic doctor. That made Junhong unable to hold back his laughter. The first step was to cut the nails in the hope of getting the killer's DNA. Then, they discovered a triangular burn mark. It was caused by an iron. The children he saved still remembered that noble act, indicating that a large amount of water had entered the lungs through the airways. Junhong concluded that cat had been brutally abused. There must be a devil in human form living around this cat. Before Mung Bin left, Junhong did not forget to remind him to be careful because there were many murderers with a history of animal abuse. Hogay appeared majestically in his police uniform. He was promoted because of his outstanding achievements, but then Hogay surprisingly refused to work at the National Bureau. Hogay left the hall in amazement with the answer, "Where else can an inspector go but to catch criminals?" Mung Bin visited his neighbor named Swan. He found her dead in the kitchen. The scene was too neat. There was no blood or shoe prints. When the police brought Swan's body out, the neighbors deliberately avoided. The police questioned about Swan's relationship and recent activities, but according to the Residential Area Information Security regulations, the security guard could not provide the complaint management book until ordered. Mung Bin recalled the first time he had met Mrs. Swan. She had been extremely harsh because she had mistaken him for a pervert. Only when Mung Bin had successfully unlocked the door and proved that he was the real owner of the apartment did she believe him. Mrs. Swan had also given Mung Bin a whole box of kimchi. She had reminded him to eat it right away to have the strength to catch criminals. However, Mung Bin had forgotten, and by then, it was really spoiled. But Mung Bin still tried to eat the kimchi. He did so to remember his close neighbor. Mung Bin also felt guilty for not being able to save Mrs. Swan from death. Hogay did not care much when he saw his father being fired from the police station. He only wondered about the sudden death conclusion regarding Commissioner Ma, because Hogay suspected that the death had been caused by a professional killer, but Hogay received a warning from his father. He advised Hogay not to question or investigate Commissioner Ma's death. The reason Hogay had refused to work at the National Bureau was because he wanted to help Mung Bin, but he was extremely sad because the victim had been Mung Bin's closest neighbor. Junhong began the autopsy. First, there was a very strange wound on the forehead. Mrs. Swan's ribs had been severely fractured, with a lot of bleeding. The left ventricle of the heart had ruptured. The lungs were also bleeding. This case was truly puzzling because many internal organs had been severely damaged, even though there were no signs of external force on the victim's body. The next step was for Junhong to do an ear endoscopy. She discovered that both eardrums were perforated, so she wanted to use special help, which was to summon an on-site consultant. The person who helped her with this important task was Do-ha. He had just resigned from the bomb squad. Do-ha had now become the manager of the Forensic Institute. Junhong thought this was the first time they had met, so she introduced them to each other. She didn't expect that they had worked together to defuse bombs and save people. After Do-ha heard Junhong's report, the first thing he said was, "So interesting." That made Mung Bin feel indignant. At least Do-ha should show some mercy to the victim. Do-ha didn't care. He immediately asked his subordinates to make a 3D reconstruction of the wound on his forehead. The results were in. The wound was octagonal in shape, but Do-ha couldn't clearly identify the murder weapon, so they needed to go to the scene. Mrs. Swan was known as the neighborhood's war god because she was always present in every argument. Sometimes it was about littering, sometimes it was about noise pollution, or sometimes it was about leaving food for stray cats. So Mrs. Swan was not liked by the people here. Because Mung Bin had a close relationship with the victim, he was also stripped of his right to participate in the investigation of this case. Colleague informed Hogay that the police had found Tae-oa. However, he was actually lying in a hospital bed, but the police still had to be on high alert, deploying forces to monitor Tae-oa. To get closer to the residence, Hogay had to pretend to be a new security guard. He asked to see the logbook, but the guard still refused to let him see it. So Hogay had no choice. He had to pretend to clean up the trash to eavesdrop. Unexpectedly, Hogay discovered the little girl sitting in a corner. The little girl complained that without Mrs. Swan, the residential area would be in chaos. The man smoked and littered everywhere. The silly princess picked up everyone's trash and brought it home to display. The owner of this car often fought over parking spots designated for people with disabilities, even though she was reported to the police by Mrs. Swan and was fined several times. Hogay thought that this source of information seemed authentic. Hogay immediately became friends with Ju-dum. He asked Ju-dum who hated Mrs. Swan the most, and he quickly received an answer. It was the family living downstairs. The homeowner's son had failed his exams twice. The homeowner homeowner even blamed Mrs. Swan for doing the laundry on the night before the university entrance exam. That made the son unable to concentrate on studying. Mrs. Swan wouldn't give up either. She poured water on his face, which led to a huge fight. The police and ambulance had to come to deal with it. They also told Mung Bin about it, but it was not recorded because the homeowner downstairs wanted to let it go. Finally, the forensic team and the police arrived. The plan to investigate the scene was disrupted because the homeowner wanted to clean up everything to prepare for the new tenants who would move in tomorrow. Do-ha showed his pleading skills, saying that 30 minutes would be enough. Hogay did not participate in the crime scene inspection, but instead sneaked into the security room. In the end, he got into a heated fight. Unexpectedly, Hogay's opponent was Mung Bin. He also came here to collect information. During the fight, Mung Bin accidentally handcuffed himself to Hogay, but Mung Bin dropped the key without realizing it. Hogay did not know what to say to Mung Bin's clumsiness. As time passed, the homeowner's face began to frown, so the inspector showed off his super flirting skills. He showed interest in buying the house. The inspector immediately pulled the homeowner aside to talk. This gave them more time to collect the crime scene. After a thorough inspection, they came up with 4 main suspects. These 4 people complained a lot about Mrs. Swan, including the smoking uncle, the woman who parked illegally, the wandering princess, and the homeowner downstairs. After Hogay and Mung Bin finished investigating, they tried to stick together to hide this embarrassing incident. They didn't expect that they would be exposed by the rescue team. Hogay seemed to be a good policeman who was good at catching criminals, but when he was faced with this cutting edge, he was trembling. Junhong even recorded this moment. Even though it was late, Mung Bin and Hogay still decided to go to room 301 to get DNA for the investigation. The homeowner of the room complained that Mrs. Swan was always doing laundry late at night. She would rinse the water many times at night. This disrupted their sleep. His wife was also exhausted from lack of sleep. The son rushed out to complain about the footsteps upstairs. Hogay had to rush up to check because he thought the forensic team had not finished their work yet. But even though he searched every corner, there was no one in Mrs. Swan's room. So where did that sound come from? Expert Sangmal analyzed the recording Mung Bin had recorded and confirmed that the wavelength and frequency were exactly the same. That is, it was taken from simulated sounds, not real life. These types of sounds, from footsteps, flushing water, washing machines, can all be easily found online. To ensure large diffusion, sound generators are often installed in bathrooms through water pipes along the building. The police were having a headache trying to find a way to get the DNA of the woman who often parked illegally, but this senior had already taken care of that. The inspector's act of pulling her out to the cafe was deliberately aimed at obtaining this cup with saliva. Mung Bin also found a tool to amplify the sound in this case. It was the speaker that was widely sold on the market. The police's mission was to find it. They were extremely tense, their equipment ready as if they were going to war. They gradually entered the old princess's house. As soon as she saw the inspector, she immediately turned on her gentle mode because she thought this man was her late husband. That's why they were lucky to find this speaker. At the end of the mission, Hogay saw that Ju Dung's hair was covered with many things. Hogay took care of her carefully. However, Ju Dung's tears were streaming down her face. Ju Dung really missed Mrs. Swan. She was the only person who always loved and took care of Ju Dung's hair. Mrs. Swan even gave her candy. Hogay did the same. He had someone he liked but couldn't see her for the time being. Song Sol was walking around town with her foster mother. She encountered an emergency but didn't dare to go to the hospital. The mother saw that her daughter was unstable, so she told her story about her time as a nurse. The mother had wanted to quit her job in the past, but thanks to Song Sol coming to her, she had the motivation to continue being a nurse. She gently advised Song Sol that if her mind was unstable, she shouldn't try to do anything, because both Do Jin and Song Sol's foster mother wanted Song Sol to live a happy life. Until now, Song Sol still carries with her the last letter that Do Jin left for her before he died. After a few steps of simulation, Mung Bin and Sang Mul coordinated well and discovered suspicious fingerprints on this speaker. Just as they were waiting for the results of the search for its owner, the forensic team requested immediate presence. Doha concluded that Mrs. Swan died from an energy explosion in the kitchen. The pressure cooker was powerful enough to destroy internal organs, broke bones, punctured eardrums, and caused bleeding without leaving any blood stains. The wound on her forehead was caused by this lid on the pressure cooker. It had an octagonal shape, exactly like the autopsy results. Mrs. Swan died from an accident while cooking rice in the kitchen. Of course, Mung Bin could not believe this answer. He was extremely excited to know that there was new evidence. A little girl accidentally live-streamed the incident. However, the sound of the explosion was exactly that of a pressure cooker, and the time was also the same as the time when Mrs. Swan was determined to have died. The fingerprints also did not match match the 4 suspects. Do-ha smiled jokingly. That made Mung Bin unable to keep calm and rushed to beat Do-ha, but Do-ha still declared that science absolutely does not lie. The police were wasting their efforts to catch an invisible murderer. Hogay only reminded Do-ha. However, the police were the ones who decided when the case would end. Song-sul fulfilled Do-jin's unfulfilled wishes. She climbed the mountain alone and then quietly camped with a cup of coffee and watched the flowers fall. Then she went out to eat deliciously with her mother and took a picture of the extremely happy family. She even imagined Do-jin was next to her and looked at her with loving eyes. Returning to Mrs. Swan's case, Mung Bin discovered a very suspicious character. That person was allergic to cats and kept complaining about Mrs. Swan. Furthermore, Mung Bin still believed that Miss Swan had something left unsaid when she discovered the cat's body, so Mung Bin couldn't give up on this case so easily. Hogay happened to see Ju Dung collecting enough empty bottles to exchange for a sausage, so he decided to take her out to eat. Ju Dung happily ate and thought that Hogay must be very rich. In the name of someone who wanted to work hard for the peace of the residential area, Hogay asked Ju Dung to provide some information about the woman named John Yu. From then on, Hogay knew that she frequently dumped trash illegally and had gotten into fights with Mrs. Swan several times before. In particular, Jang Yu was preparing for a divorce and was selling his house. Hogay immediately asked his colleague to pretend to be a buyer to return to the house. Then Hogay secretly observed the bathroom carefully. He discovered signs of a speaker used to transmit sound. This was exactly as the police predicted. The evidence was complete. How could Jang Yu deny it? However, Jang Yu only installed the speaker to deal with Mrs. Swan, because Mrs. Swan was determined not to let Jang Yu dump the trash in violation of regulations. That's why Jang Yu's husband discovered the motel bill. From there, he discovered that Jang Yu was having an affair. The husband even went to the hotel to verify, and then he decided to divorce Jang Yu. But Jang Yu continued to litter, even though Mrs. Swan had passed away, because Jang Yu also hated that male student who was preparing for the 3rd university entrance exam. Because he had a rude and grumpy attitude towards others, Hogay brought the photo of the pressure cooker, but Jang Yu didn't react at all. If so, Jang Yu couldn't be the murderer. Do-ha was excited in the extremely unique room. Do-ha also asked Hogay to arrange the gun, making Hogay surprised and confused. Hogay sarcastically remarked that no law of physics could explain how the murder weapon, a pressure cooker lid, disappeared from the crime scene. Therefore, they needed to check whether the explosion had been intentional or not. Hogay could not give up this case easily, because then the culprit would be able to sleep well. Do-ha was busy studying the documents again. He even cooked rice in a pressure cooker. Sure enough, Do-ha had discovered something very interesting. This was something that people who did not cook rice could not know. Mung Bin welcomed a resident of the same apartment building who provided more information related to Mrs. Swan. That was, she had often stolen the internet from this person's house. Thanks to that, the police could find the access history through the router. On the other side, Hogay was a model security guard. He actively collected and sorted the trash. Just then, the forensic team teased, holding spoons as if they were going to eat the meal together. They even remembered to bring extra food. They conducted a serious experiment with elaborate equipment and models, including a pig heart that was 94% similar to a human heart. Do-ha also carefully arranged the crime scene. They started using foreign objects to block the nozzle of the pressure regulator on the lid of the pot. Those who wanted to live moved back, so Hogay and Mung Bin quickly moved away and calmly watched. After several tests, the pressure cooker still did not explode. The atmosphere became quiet and disappointed again. In the end, only the steel wire remained. Do-ha begged the pressure cooker to explode so that he would not lose face in front of everyone. And finally, what they had been waiting for came. A loud explosion, broken ribs in the right place, damaged left ventricle, and bleeding. That was the perfect result. So, it was certain that someone had deliberately inserted the wire to create the murder. Then, the perpetrator quietly took it away from the scene. The work of science was done. Now it was time for the police to speak up. Just like Hogay had said, the investigation would only end when they found the perpetrator. The investigation results from the access history were available. It was strange that Miss Swan had bought used underwear from a female college student. If she was not a pervert, then Miss Swan must have been curious. Sangmal had personally taken action against this security guard. The two of them fought so fiercely that Mung Bin, who had been standing outside, was scared like that. Thanks to that, Sangmal and Mung Bin were able to access the theft report documents at the apartment building. It was late at night when Hogay appeared with a pile of used bottles. He confirmed that it was the DNA of all the residents of the apartment building. Hogay and Ju Dung had had a hard time finding all those bottles. He had even sorted them out and written down the owners of the apartment. Hogay asked the forensic staff to compare them with the DNA under the claws of the missing cat. Hogay finished his work and then went back to bother Doha. Hogay calmly ate his noodles, while Doha was extremely upset. Hogay even teased Doha that being Dojin's friend was no different from being Hogay's friend. Hogay even took the chair and slept soundly. That made Doha shake his head in dismay. Junhong came to announce the test results, but surprisingly, none of the results matched. This meant that the suspect was not a resident there. It just so happened that the lab had an unlabeled sample that had not been tested. Sang Mul and Mung Bin finally found the girl who had reported the stolen underwear. She had also told Mrs. Swan about the incident before, so she asked for more information to help the girl find the pervert. The police put themselves in the position of the pervert. The police thought that the pervert and Mrs. Swan would deal indirectly so as not to reveal themselves. The most reasonable place to carry out the plan was public locker. The final sample test results were available. The item tested was Ju Dung's milk carton. The saliva on it was related to the DNA under the cat's claws. In other words, the main suspect was Ju Dung's father. Hogay immediately went to look for Ju Dung but couldn't find her. Hogay was surprised to know that she didn't live here. The police here were nervously waiting for the pervert to reveal himself. As soon as he saw this face, Mung Bin was extremely surprised. Wasn't this the old security guard who had worked in the building before and had just quit? Ju Dung returned home. The little girl happily ate the meal her father had cooked, even though her father had not eaten a bite. A few minutes later, the little girl fell into a coma. Her father was in pain and said that he would soon follow his daughter. Fortunately, the police arrived in time. Hogay prevented him from leaving this world. He carefully handcuffed the father and took Ju Dung to the emergency room. The person who appeared in the rescue team was Song Sol. She quickly gave first aid and checked Ju Dung's condition. Hogay could do nothing but pray for her safety. After a while of searching, Song Mal found the stolen women's underwear that was carefully hidden. She also found the phone and the pressure cooker lid that was used as a weapon. That was enough to convict Ju Dung's father, because before that, the father had worked at a pressure cooker manufacturing company. He understood better than anyone how it worked. He was even beaten by Hogay for cruelly poisoning his own daughter. The father cried and said that he was in debt due to gambling. He happened to see women's underwear being purchased at a high price, so the father took the opportunity to check the hallway and stole the underwear. He sold all the money to pay off the debt, but then the father was caught red-handed by Mrs. Swan. She asked him to quit his job immediately, otherwise, Mrs. Swan would tell the whole world about this shameful matter. Moreover, Mrs. Swan did not want Ju Dung to grow up with a terrible father like him. Because of that, he couldn't earn money to pay off his debt, so Ju Dung also had to go hungry. Ju Dung's father planned to leave, but he still wanted to take revenge on Mrs. Swan by torturing her favorite cat. In the end, he was caught by Mrs. Swan. Mrs. Swan wanted to put Ju Dung's father in jail, so he pretended to announce that he would turn himself in. The father told Mrs. Swan that the car was parked in the wrong place again. He took advantage of the moment when Mrs. Swan left the house to carry out this murder plan, and so as soon as Mrs. Swan turned on the stove to check if the rice was cooked, the explosion occurred just as the forensic staff simulated. Just waiting for that, Ju Dung's father secretly took the lid and Mrs. Swan's phone and left the scene. But then he knew that he would be imprisoned sooner or later. That's why the father decided to leave the poison and leave this world like that. Whatever the reason, his crime was unforgivable. Ju Dung saw Hogay's attitude. The sensible girl quickly realized that her father was the bad guy that Hogay wanted to catch. Hogay didn't know what to do but encourage her. Mung Bin returned home and found that the package Mrs. Swan ordered had arrived. It was the small whistle that always accompanied her on patrol. Mrs. Swan often patrolled at night to help the women of the building get home safely when it was deserted, so Mung Bin picked it up and blew it continuously. The whistle woke up many other residents, but Mung Bin still didn't stop. This is Mung Bin's way of showing gratitude and remembering his close neighbor who always devoted himself to everyone. Ju Dung is also happier. She hugs the teddy bear that Song Sol bought for her and excitedly goes to the charity house. That is the place that adopted her. Hogay also did not forget to thank his young colleague. Song Sol went to meet and confide in the station chief. She was also taking a break from work to find some peace after the shocking incident of her husband. They both went through difficult times, both emotionally and professionally, but life was full of suffering. People didn't always walk smooth paths. Song Sol encouraged the station chief to try to return to the team, but it seemed like she still needed more time to think. The station chief didn't forget to give Song Sol a small gift that her grandmother had prepared. Song Sol returned home to find Hogay already sitting in front of the door. He thanked her for taking good care of Ju Dung. At this moment, the alarm sounded. There was a serious fight. The police rushed to the scene to grasp the situation. It turned out that the people here were fighting with full weapons. This scene also made the rescue team a bit scared. Hogay immediately took a giant water hose and sprayed it on the rioting crowd. The siren also sounded continuously, causing the crowd to immediately run away. The police discovered that someone was injured in the car. They quickly went closer to check and found out that this person was dead. The victim's stomach was abnormally distended, with many knife wounds all over his body. Taioa fell into a coma after escaping from prison with special drugs. He suffered from acute kidney failure and had to undergo a kidney transplant immediately. Therefore, even though Taioa's medical parole had expired, the police could not take him back to prison. The inspector went to see Sunjohn's wife. Sunjohn had been imprisoned for risking his life to exchange evidence for money. The inspector comforted Sunjohn's wife by saying that he had already filed a petition to reduce Sunjohn's sentence and that Sunjohn would be released soon. Sang-mol gave her 2 daughters careful instructions before going to school. However, she forgot to give her 2 daughters the phone. Sang-mol didn't expect that this carelessness would save her life. On this side, Lawyer Zhang met former prosecutor Chundong again. Lawyer Zhang wanted to let Chundong listen to the call from the secret boss, but he didn't care. Chundong tried to start the engine and leave, but the functions were disabled. Since the boss had already sabotaged control system, the only way was to listen to his request. They had already known about the documents related to the drug trafficking case. Those were confidential documents that Chundong had stolen to create an alibi for Taioa. The boss had only failed once, and the one who guessed that plan was Hogay. Hogay was sure that Taioa couldn't have done the arson attack alone because it was too professional and didn't leave any traces. Chunhong wanted his son to live, so he had no choice but to cooperate with the boss. The station chief finally decided to return to the office. This was a place that held many good memories for Dojin. At that moment, the police came to summon her to the station for negligence at work. The station chief did not report to her superiors, but went to see her husband on her own, even though the station chief knew that he was the one who set the series of fires. On this side, the forensics still could not determine the identity of the victim because the tips of the fingers were all cut off by a blunt object. The victim's teeth were also filed down. Some teeth were also pulled out, possibly because the victim had received medical treatment, and that way it would be extremely easy to identify. In other words, the perpetrator was extremely professional in successfully fooling the forensics. Through X-ray, they discovered that the victim had many foreign objects in her abdomen. Even Jun Hong, who had 7 years of experience, had never encountered such a case. She had no choice but to ask for Doha's remote help. As soon as he received the photo, he jumped up in panic. Doha immediately rushed to the forensic room to prevent Jun Hong from touching the electric wires on the abdomen. However, Doha was a beat too late. Jun Hong had just put down the scissors when a terrifying explosion occurred, causing her to faint on the spot. Doha also fell to the floor. Only then did they realize that the foreign object was a glass ball. Before they could come to their senses, Sang-mol and Hogay received a terrorist call from the same person. That person asked them not to leave the building, or else the entire building would explode. That person had even hacked into the security camera system and was monitoring it remotely. She confidently claimed that she was the one who had planted the bomb that had just exploded, and it was not the only one. Doha examined the victim's body again. He discovered that a homemade bomb had been implanted along the leg of the body. Hogay asked the mysterious person to let them take Junhong to the hospital, as she was still unconscious and had lost a lot of blood. However, she insisted that the explosion would not kill anyone. She also asked them to call relatives to give emergency instructions from afar. And the person Hogay chose was Song Sol. He explained Junhong's current situation, and he had received specific instructions from Song Sol. Hogay discreetly tapped on the phone as a signal to Song Sol. He just hoped that she would understand. Doha calmly followed each step, and fortunately, Junhong gradually regained consciousness and breathed normally. Hogay decided to challenge the mysterious person. He said that if she liked, she could detonate the bomb. That way, her plan would be ruined. The police would definitely never compromise with a blackmailer. She was not surprised by Hogay's arrogance, simply because she had already investigated him very thoroughly. The next target was Sang-mol's 2 daughters. When the mysterious person accurately read the information of the 2 girls, Sang-mol screamed loudly and cursed the mysterious person. And the mysterious person couldn't stay calm because of the noise either. The mysterious person threatened that if Sang-mol stepped out of that door, the 2 children who already lacked a father would lose their mother as well. In this situation, Sang-mol did not know what to do. Sang-mol collapsed, even falling into a state of hyperventilation. Doha had to try to help her regulate her breathing. On this side, the police also could not collect anything from the murderer's clothes because all the clothing tags were completely cut off. Even the soles of her shoes were completely removed. This was definitely definitely not an ordinary criminal. Finally, the mysterious person mentioned her purpose. She wanted Junhong to personally bring the results of the appraisal of the Chinese restaurant case to the court this afternoon. Furthermore, she had to testify with a false statement. The mysterious person then ended the call without further explanation. This case involved the death of a man in a private room at a Chinese restaurant. The other man had been arrested. However, the police had no evidence that this was a murder case. There was only one unusual thing, which was the red fibers in the victim's nose and mouth. It would probably match the red mattress in the store, so the red fibers were sent for testing to assess compatibility. If the results matched, it meant that there was an impact that caused airway obstruction, and the defendant would be convicted. According to their records, both of them were normal people. How could they be related to the bomb maker? When Sang Mol knew that the camera in the forensic room could not pick up sound, she sat quietly in a corner, and now she spoke. Sang Mol had another phone. They could use it to contact the outside world. Sang Mol silently thanked her daughter for leaving her phone behind. Hogay could do nothing but pray for her safety. However, he was too busy singing to answer the call. Hogay couldn't stand still and let the control go. He immediately made a deal with the mysterious person. If they could find out the victim's identity within 15 minutes, the entire building would be safe. Otherwise, they would let her detonate the bomb. Hogay really lived up to his reputation as the crazy dog of police force. The mysterious person asked Doha to handcuff herself to the scanner. Hogay had to hand over the key. On the other side, Song Sol was confused about what was going on. She played the recording of the phone call with Hogay to Mung Bin. They found a distress signal. It was the same as the code Hogay had secretly sent them, only now did Mung Bin open his phone. He read the message asking to check on Sang Mol's two daughters. She told Mung Bin not to call her back and emphasized that code 0 meant emergency. This way, they could be sure that their comrades were in real danger. The chief immediately sent someone to ensure the safety of those in danger. He then reported the news to Song Sol. Meanwhile, Sang Mol sent a warning. She said that the security cameras here had been hacked and they were being watched. Sang Mol revealed this so that the police could come up with a plan. Hogay discovered a strange object in the knee joint. Luckily, it wasn't a bomb, but an artificial joint. Luckily, each prosthetic had a serial number for tracking. If they could get it out, they could figure out who the body was. However, the detonator cord was right above. If it was off by a little, it would explode. Hogay was the only one who could handle this task. He tried to do it with great determination, but Hogay's hands were shaking as he held the lives of so many people in his hands. He remembered Song Sol's message. She told him to always return home safely, so Hogay calmed down and continued the surgery. Then, he carefully sawed the bone. After a tense struggle with the concerned eyes of his three comrades, Hogay finally succeeded in removing the artificial joint, but he accidentally cut off the serial number. Junhong was extremely disappointed when he heard it. At this moment, the test results were announced. Junhong was forced to go and follow the mysterious person's request. As soon as she ended the call, Hogay clearly read the serial number he had seen to the surprise of his teammates. He gave a simple reason. Why should he inform the criminal of the investigation results? Junhong decided to throw away her phone. She got into the car that the mysterious person had prepared. There was a phone and an earphone ready. The police had already traced the victim's identity. Surprisingly, that person was a police officer. At the same time, they had also found the signal to hack into the security camera transmission. What they needed to do now was to create a camera video to pretend that Hogay and the others were still there. Sure enough, these masked people did not detect any abnormalities. Meanwhile, the rescue team quietly approached the scene with great momentum. They came here to rescue their colleagues. After confirming safety, Sang Mol immediately contacted his daughter. She breathed a sigh of relief when she knew that her daughter was safe. At the same time, Duha also asked the manager of the Forensic Institute to quickly carry out the evacuation plan. The alarm was immediately issued. Everyone calmly left the building as instructed. Mung Bin went to the officer's house and discovered a shocking truth. He was an inspector on an undercover mission. He was monitoring the activities of a gang with extremely sophisticated operations. In addition, the scene was covered in blood, so Mung Bin guessed that he had been murdered in his own home. The secret police officer was then disemboweled and stuffed with a homemade bomb. At the forensic room, the rescue team decided to drill the door to approach their teammates who were imprisoned inside. Because it was too urgent, Hogay did not care about the danger and rushed in to help. After everything was successful, Hogay immediately told Sengwoo to go see her daughter. But how could she go when she had not completed her mission? Even Doha was the same. He was determined to neutralize the bomb to ensure the integrity of the evidence, and that evidence was the body lying there. Song Sol quickly reassured Hogay to go catch the culprit. She did not forget to tell him to return home safely. She would stay to take take care of Do-ha's wound and assist in carrying out the mission. According to the documents that the late inspector had researched, this gang specialized in loan sharking. They organized gambling activities. This gang even laundered money for politicians. However, they did not have any information about the three leaders. Coincidentally, Captain knew a criminal who was in prison. He used to be a famous figure in the loan sharking world, so the captain personally went to get more information. Of course, the captain had to add a few threats to make him tell the truth. The trial took place. Defendant testified that while they were having dinner together, the old man suddenly collapsed, so he immediately performed CPR, but the victim still did not survive. Do-ha quickly made a device to neutralize the homemade bomb, but his nosebleed continued to flow. However, according to Song-sol's assessment, it was a leak of cerebrospinal fluid, so Do-ha had to go to the hospital quickly, but Do-ha did not want to leave his work unfinished. He immediately asked Song-sol to help him. Do-ha asked her to make a basic incision, so that he could see the device implanted in the corpse's leg. The gangster put on sunglasses and began to explain. He said that the leader was the chairman. That was also the old man who was killed, but the other people were number 2 and number 3, respectively. One of them must have killed the chairman to gain control of the organization. The secret officer could also have been killed by number 2 or number 3. The captain informed Hogay of the news he had just received. The defendant was the second person. If he was imprisoned, his life would be miserable, so the defendant would fight to the end to be declared innocent. However, if number 2 was imprisoned, number 3 would automatically become the chairman, and if Jun-hong gave an unfavorable testimony, he would kill Jun-hong immediately. Song-mol was full of determination to catch the bastards who dared to touch her relatives and colleagues. She tried her best to dig through the pile of food that the mysterious people had called back. The mysterious person also asked his subordinates to check on the situation of a certain child. Then she looked intently at the frame in the courtroom. Song-sol concentrated on her work. After all, she had been a nurse assisting in surgery, so Song-sol's actions were extremely reliable. She quickly succeeded in a short time. Now they just needed to insert this device to break the electromagnetic pulse and neutralize the bomb. It was time for Jun-hong to testify. She accurately presented the autopsy results. There was no external impact or any factors from the heart and brain. That showed that this death was sudden death, except for the remaining hairs in the nose and mouth. She suspected that it matched the pillow at the store, so she requested a test, and the results were in her hands with the seal intact. Hogay was also present. He quietly observed from afar and received Do-ha's successful notification signal. However, this homemade tool was ineffective because it was out of battery. Song-sol and Do-ha split up to find batteries. They asked Hogay to try to prolong the time, so Hogay immediately rushed to disrupt the trial. He even said nonsense about there being a bomb. He also carefully instructed them on how to evacuate. That's how the mysterious person discovered that Hogay had escaped from the forensic room. At the same time, Song-sol also found another battery. They tried to test it a second time, but Do-ha was suddenly stunned, but he still managed to destroy the homemade bomb before the mysterious person detonated it. Person number 2 received the news that the operation plan had failed. He was worried, but the judge announced the results that the 2 samples did not match. This meant that the defendant was innocent. Jun-hong keenly noticed the abnormality on the judge's face, so she was sure that he was also threatened. The truth was that his son had been kidnapped by those bad guys. In order to protect his son, the judge had no choice but to give a false verdict based on the test results. Sang-mol succeeded in finding the business card of the restaurant that the bad guys often ordered from. Through the owner's information, the police knew the latest delivery location. Of course, in order to approach the bad guys secretly, the captain had to act like a very professional delivery man. When the bad guys heard the food delivery person coming, they opened the door without any suspicion. After the captain entered, he discovered that the judge's son was also there. The captain immediately signaled the police outside. Hogay was just waiting for that. The rescue team rushed in with great courage. They showed off their martial arts skills. In no time, the rescue team defeated the bad guys. They got the boy out safely. Jun-hong needed to keep the defendant who had just been declared innocent, so he asked the chief prosecutor for help. He pretended to ask the defendant to return his prison clothes. Because of the urgency, he had to wear the lawyer's baggy pants. The defendant thought he was back with his friends, but Hogay was always a bother. He brought an emergency arrest warrant and expertly handcuffed the defendant, even nearly made his pants fall down. Of course, they didn't forget to take pictures to show off their heroic feat. On this side, lawyer Jung informed Tae-oa that he was in critical condition with acute kidney failure. Tae-oa's only way to survive was to get a kidney transplant. However, organ transplant surgeries were under the control of the government, government, so lawyer Jiang couldn't do anything. That's why Taoa threatened the lawyer. He had already received 30 billion, so he had to act quickly. Taoa even asked him to provide him with a pager. Doha moved into his close friend Dojin's house. He didn't forget to brag that he had kept his promise to bring Song Sol home safely as Hogay had requested earlier. It just so happened that Song Sol had also finished work, so the three of them, the forensics, the rescue team, and the police, were on the same floor. This was truly a superhero team. Hogay still kept her habit of reporting to Song Sol that he had returned home safely, but she wasn't satisfied. After all, he was still injured. While they were talking, they received an emergency call. It was true that criminals were so active that they didn't even give Hogay's team a second to rest. The one who called for help was Lawyer John. He didn't know where he was. Lawyer Jiang's memory was only of the motel parking lot. However, he was seriously injured because Lawyer Jiang had a Y-shaped cut on his chest and blood was constantly flowing. In order to save Lawyer Jiang as soon as possible, the police had no choice but to find the location. After they searched for a while, Sang Mol noticed a towel with a brand printed on it. It was a fried chicken shop, so she contacted that shop, but they still couldn't determine which motel it was because this shop distributed to too many places. Meanwhile, Lawyer Jiang kept calling for help because of the excruciating pain. He even discovered that there was a syringe in his back. Song Sol realized that it was a painkiller necklace, so she asked Lawyer Jiang to try to press the button on it to maintain his life. Although Hogay tried to stop him because he thought it was too dangerous. If he didn't do it, he would soon die from the pain. Lawyer Jiang followed Song Sol's instructions. He tried to press the button but completely fainted. After a while of tracing, San Mol finally located the motel. The police immediately set out to approach. They discovered Lawyer Jiang's car, but even though the police tried to search every room in the motel, they only found couples and no Lawyer Jiang. At that moment, there was a report of a bloody smell and moaning sounds coming from a closed shopping mall nearby. The police and rescue team knew they had been fooled. They immediately headed there. Song Sol was the first to discover Lawyer Jiang. She tried to perform CPR on him, but because of the excessive bleeding, she used clamps to fix the wound. Unfortunately, Lawyer Jiang died on the way back to the hospital. The people in the ambulance didn't even have time to hear what he whispered before he died. Dr. Sarin would be the one to perform the autopsy. He was a new employee at the forensic department. Dr. Sarin saw that the wound was unusual, so he immediately asked to see Song Sol, who was the first one to perform first aid. Meanwhile, former Chief Prosecutor Chun Dong came to see the prisoner. He threatened to put him in prison for life if he didn't tell them what he knew. He finally confessed that the mastermind was a boss nicknamed Deck. Song Sol showed up at Sarin's request to explain the incident, but he stared at her with a skeptical gaze. That made her wonder where she went wrong. Dr. Sarin personally invited Song Sol to question her about her somewhat aggressive way of stopping the bleeding, but she was sure that it was the best solution for the victim at that time. Sarin looked at Song Sol with a questioning gaze. He guessed that she had participated in surgeries, so she should help the forensic staff with this autopsy. Sarin performed the autopsy and discovered many abnormalities. The victim was missing the right lung, right lobe, right liver, and right kidney. Only the heart was intact because that was the only way the victim could survive. It was very likely that perpetrator had a specialized doctor, and he also had an assassin. Meanwhile, Sarin thought that perpetrator intentionally left the victim in the water tank as a way to show off his crime, but Hogay disagreed because the perpetrator did it more like a challenge to the police. The perpetrator wanted to tell the police that he could attack anyone more times. Not only that, Sarin also discovered the difference in the way the liver was removed. It was done very neatly and cleanly. This is often seen in organ transplants. On this side, after careful research, Duha concluded that this bomb was very sophisticatedly made. This pager was also imported intact from abroad, so it was very difficult for them to trace the information. The investigation came to a standstill when there were no fingerprints or hair at the scene. The only clue left was to review all the transplant surgery records from all the hospitals across the country. After the police investigated the cases related to doctors as suspected by the forensics, Meng Bin discovered an extremely suspicious character. That was the case of female student Min Dum. The suspect in this case was Taoa. But why was he acquitted? This case is special because Min Dung's father is an anesthesiologist. He remembers the grudge against Lawyer John because Lawyer Jiang claimed that she was a prostitute who demanded money from his client. After that lawsuit, Min Dung's mother left the world because she could not bear the pressure of public opinion. Min Dung's father has now quit his job and lives alone in the mountains, in the very place where his wife left the world. Duha asked his close uncle to help fix this pager. Luckily, the uncle also possesses quite the talent. He also affirmed that he would definitely help. The former chief prosecutor prosecutor contacted the boss to ask about the location of the drug trafficking documents, but in order for him to provide that information, Chundong had to exchange the case file of Congressman Ma, otherwise he would come to find his son. The former chief prosecutor had no choice. He opened his safe. Chundong took it away and replaced it with another copy. After Hogay and Meng Bin were forced to climb the mountain, they were both surprised and frightened by the scarecrow. They finally met Mr. Mungu. He had no phone and no contact with anyone, so Mungu didn't care what happened in the world. But when Mungu heard that lawyer Jiang was dead, he was very happy. Finally, the crime was punished. His wife and daughter could die in peace. Of course, in this desolate mountain area, there couldn't be cameras to verify Mungu's alibi. On this side, Doha successfully restored the machine, and he received a series of numbers that were very similar to the IP address. Hogay returned home and saw Song Sol sitting outside. He mistakenly thought that she was waiting for him, but in fact, she wanted to ask for a signature on a petition to waive the summons from Station Chief Duku. Afterwards, the two had a simple dinner together. Song Sol expressed her concern that Hogay had to take on such a dangerous case. She thought the murderer was very brutal. Song Sol even imagined the worst-case scenario. She hoped that Hogay would not participate in solving the case. But Hogay's righteous nature did not allow him to be humble and afraid of the culprit. He was determined to punish the culprit. Hogay only wished for one thing. No matter how badly injured he was, he would still have Song Sol by his side. Prosecutor Park questioned the station chief about the special documents related to the fire in the slum. She revealed that she wanted to research the case again, because at that time, the rescue team had thought it was arson, but the police had ignored that opinion. Prosecutor Park asked the station chief to stop ruining the future with that stupid action, and to stop investigating things from the past. She hesitated, unsure whether to risk her entire career to expose the truth, when the captain confided that he would always act according to what is right, so as not to be ashamed before his juniors. Because of that, the station chief decided to hand over the documents of the fire 10 years ago to the police. It happened right when the conflict between the contractor and the residents had been at its peak. After that incident, the residents were forced to leave without receiving any compensation. Saren carefully performed the experiment and observed lawyer Jiang's internal organs. He then immediately summoned Song Sol. Determining which part had been taken first was the key to that case. Song Sol's judgment completely coincided with Saren's thinking, so they had to go to the police station together. Saren believed that the autopsy results were sometimes not what the police wanted. This could easily cause conflicts between the forensic staff and the police. Saren didn't want to understand the thoughts of the living. He felt more comfortable when he was in contact with corpses. When Saren stabbed the corpses, they didn't feel any hatred or resentment. Saren just calmly found out what happened to them in their last moments of existence. The captain suspected that there must be a force manipulating the fire that the station chief mentioned. However, the police had to investigate the matter thoroughly and find solid evidence. Sangmul was exhausted after checking all the surgical records of the hospitals, but she didn't find anything. People need to eat to have the strength to work. The police took advantage of the time to fill their hungry stomachs. But at this moment, Saren called and asked the police to come immediately. After Saren and Song Sol conducted careful tests, they concluded that removing the liver or lungs was just a distraction. Because the vein cut was too violent, it was impossible to transplant organs. What the perpetrator wanted was also the first thing to be taken. That thing was the kidney. Hogay quickly thought of the culprit. The person who needed to be careful the most right now was Taoa. Hogay immediately went to the hospital. However, the victim on the bed had already been replaced. Saren took the initiative to take care of Song Sol's wound. He also encouraged her to put aside her guilt if she failed to save the victims. If Saren didn't have a strong spirit, he would have missed the important evidence shown through the victims' bodies. However, this time, Saren had a bad feeling. The killer was very smart, much smarter than they had imagined. The news of Taoa's escape from prison was made public in the press. This was a huge blow to the police force. The police's determination to investigate increased fiercely. They realized that Taoa would definitely need money to transplant organs, so they had to quickly grasp all of his accounts and transaction history. The tax office revealed that Taoa had sold part of his land and earned 34 billion. That money had been transferred to an account in Switzerland. However, it took the police several months to ask them to help provide documents. The person who handled all of this was definitely lawyer Jiang. Hogay determined the location of his recent phone signal. The police just needed to find that phone and everything would be solved. Of course, the cyber security team quickly tracked it down, and the first application downloaded was cryptocurrency. Coincidentally, this cryptocurrency application transacted an amount equivalent to 34 billion billion. Then 34 billion was transferred to lawyer Zhang's account. That 34 billion was probably the amount to buy his kidney. Sangmul also discovered that a large transaction had been sent to the orthopedic clinic. Just waiting for that, the police immediately went out. However, when the police arrived, there was no one there. There was no sign of Tai Oa being there. In fact, he was safely receiving treatment in another secret place with equally modern equipment. When the chief prosecutor returned to the safe, he found that the file was gone. The case of Congressman Ma must have been the boss's weak spot. Sang Mul was present at the scene to look for any remaining traces. She finally succeeded in getting the only fingerprint. Even if the murderer used gloves, if he didn't know how to use them, it would be useless. The plan to capture Tai Oa failed. Hogay calmly considered the situation and was certain that there must be an ambulance to transport patient to surgery. So the police only needed to check all the ambulances in the area on the day of lawyer Zhang's death. However, even though the police tried to investigate each ambulance, they still couldn't find any clues. The investigation was once again at a standstill. Just then, the results of the fingerprint examination at the scene came out. The person who matched was Moongu. Hogay immediately went to his residence, but it was too late. Moongu was nothing more than a corpse. The cause of death is most likely the anesthetic left at the scene. Former Chief Prosecutor Chundong unexpectedly meets Hogay because he knows he was having trouble with this case. Chundong also suggested that the police might have overlooked a hidden crime. That is, the perpetrator had committed the crime before and had not been discovered and punished by the law. Chundong even provided Hogay with documents to study, and it was related to the first case that the father and son had investigated together. Chundong knew that Dek was carrying out another dangerous plot, so the decision to stop or continue depended on Hogay's choice. The father and son then decided to perform an autopsy on Congressman Ma in the hope of finding any abnormalities. Hogay knew that anyone who knew about Dek's whereabouts would be killed, and it was very likely that Hogay's father would be the next target. However, former prosecutor Chundong could not say that Hogay was the one Dek wanted to kill. Siren discovered white crystalline substances in the victim's stomach. He did not hesitate to taste it, to everyone's shock, and Siren confirmed that it was salt because it was extremely salty. The results showed that there was no evidence that Congressman Ma was murdered. Chundong had spent his entire life as a prosecutor, so he still did not believe that this was simply a natural death. And coincidentally, Hogay also had the same thought. No crime is perfect. As long as the perpetrator commits a crime, there will definitely be traces left behind. Inspector Mun also got new clues about Sun Jones. He was someone who had just been released from prison not long ago. Inspector Mun decided to arrest him himself. Hogay returned to Congressman Ma's house and relived the events that happened that day. Because there were security cameras installed in the house, the entire action was recorded. Congressman Ma enjoyed his breakfast as usual. The maid also ate the same portion, so the possibility of Congressman Ma getting food poisoning could be ruled out. He then rested on the chair and died shortly after. Hogay observed carefully for a while and discovered that Congressman Ma kept adding salt to his soup bowl. He immediately tasted it and found out that it was not salty at all. Duha wanted to find out about this strange IP series, so he went to Sangmul. Sangmul was also determined to find out the truth. Sangmul asked Doha's acquaintance to install equipment to access military satellite communications. Doha realized that this action was very dangerous because it could touch the underground world of organ trafficking and drugs. But his professional conscience did not allow Doha to give up. Hogay had the test results of the salt shaker on the table. In addition to salt, there was another ingredient, potassium. If used in excess of the allowable amount, it would be fatal, especially for elderly patients with underlying kidney disease, like Congressman Ma. Hogay accidentally saw Song Sol going up the stairs. Only then did he know that she was obsessed with elevators because of the dangers that had happened. So Song Sol didn't dare to take the elevator anymore. Hogay quietly followed behind, full of thought. But then Song Sol took the initiative to ask Hogay to help her. Song Sol knew that fear was very difficult to overcome. Hogay held her hand and stepped into the elevator resolutely. Holding hands tightly was Hogay's way of becoming the spiritual motivation that helped Song Sol overcome everything. Captain Park studied documents about the fire in the slum. He noticed something unusual. The fireproof shoes of the firefighters were all burned. Captain Park asked to contact the relatives of the dead soldiers. He also got the artifact, which was this pair of shoes. Captain Park affirmed that he was determined to expose the truth about the sacrifice of the firefighters. Hogay and Mung Bin went to see the maid at Congressman Ma's house. Only then did they know that the salt bottle was sent from the United States. The salt shaker's interface was quite luxurious, so the maid used it without much thought. The police checked the shipping history, and there was no order like the maid said. Luckily, the driver's license evidence was still on file, but all that information was fake. Captain Park brought the results of the shoe examination from the fire 10 years ago. It showed that protective soles were all burned. There was a lot of flammable liquid left. That meant that someone had intentionally poured the flammable liquid onto the floor. So this was definitely arson. Captain Park immediately warned the prosecutor. No matter who powerful person he was flattering, the police were determined to investigate this fire thoroughly. The prosecutor immediately reported this incident to the chief prosecutor and was scolded for not doing his job. But when he knew that Hogay was there, he was very excited. The driver's license could be fake, but the car was definitely not. The police went to find the owner of this car, but he indifferently replied that the renter had paid a large sum of cash to remove the GPS, so there was no information left on the car. Hearing this, Hogay went crazy and asked the economic police to arrest this bastard for daring to evade taxes. If the owner of the car continued to keep quiet, he would have to go to jail. So he obediently revealed that he had secretly installed another GPS. Taioa was truly no ordinary person. He escaped from the hospital in a hearse instead of an ambulance, which is why the police couldn't find any traces. Thanks to this machine, Sangmol found Taioa's current location. Hogay had just promised to keep the business secret for the boss, but he immediately went back on his word as soon as he got in the car. How could he let a criminal off the hook? Inspector Moon checked the security cameras at the convenience store. He quickly wrote down Sun Jones's license plate number, requested a location search, and immediately found him. Finally, they found Taioa lying alone in a pickup truck. Of course, he was not happy to see Hogay. Then Taioa begged Hogay to save his life because his current health condition made him experience hell on earth. However, Hogay did not want to save a lowly citizen like him at all. He used light violence to force Taioa to reveal the boss. Taioa had to tell the truth that Dek was Korean. He used to be a doctor in America with outstanding expertise. Taioa even revealed that the first victim was Julia. Hogay immediately asked Taioa to call Dek. Here, as soon as he finished speaking, his phone received repeated calls. The person who walked in was Inspector Mun with many stab wounds on his body. It turned out that Inspector Mun had been chasing Sun Jones. He used reason to convince Sun Jones to reform, but in the end, Inspector Mun was counterattacked and stabbed many times. He knew he could not live anymore. Inspector Mun only told Hogay that he must catch the culprit. Then Inspector Mun died immediately, leaving Hogay in shock. Doha had successfully decoded the file. There were many bomb design drawings in it, especially it completely matched the previous bombs that he had participated in solving. But there was still a bomb design on the pickup truck that had never been recorded, so the culprit must be planning to plant a bomb. Hogay was desperate and resentful. He used all his strength to strangle the bastard who had caused so many innocent people to lose their lives. Among those who had to die were Hogay's teammates. At that moment, Saren appeared and stopped Hogay's impulsive action. But how did he know to come here? Hogay reasoned quickly. Saren was a highly specialized doctor in the US. Moreover, he deliberately lied that the thing in Congressman Ma's stomach was salt when it wasn't salty at all. It was very possible that he was Dek. Truth was just as Hogay had guessed. Saren even waved his hand defiantly. Duha panicked and informed Hogay but couldn't get through. He had to call Mung Bin. Only then did Mung Bin know that Hogay was in danger in that very car. Mung Bin rushed to save Hogay, but as soon as he got close, the car exploded. The rescue team immediately set out to help, and when the rescue team knew that 2 inspectors were also at the scene, they became more urgent than ever. Just then, another explosion occurred. They quickly increased the number of hoses to put out the fire. Meanwhile, Song Sol found Mung Bin lying in pain nearby. He kept screaming, but in order to provide first aid, Song Sol had to calm Mung Bin down and bear the pain for a while. Afterwards, Mung Bin was taken to the hospital by ambulance. The fire was under control. The firefighters carefully approached the burned car, and what they did not expect happened. There was a body lying in the rubble. Everyone was shocked and in pain. They just hoped it was not their colleague. Song Sol was speechless with pain. She remembered the request to stay by Hogay's side, no matter how badly he was injured, and the time he had helped her overcome her fear. Doha quickly ran a DNA test. They could breathe a sigh of relief that it wasn't Hogay, but everyone was equally heartbroken when they knew that the victim was Inspector Moon. On this side, Dek was escorted away from the scene by his accomplice Sun Jones. He calmly treated his wound and recalled what had just happened. Taioa had colluded with Dek to trap Hogay. Taioa was very happy to see his enemy fall into his trap. Unexpectedly, Dek killed him immediately when he was no longer useful. The station chief knew that her husband was the mastermind behind the series of arson attacks, but he had nothing to do with the fire in the slums, so the station chief was determined to find out the truth. Only then would the station chief be able to face Dojin. Hogay finally woke up in a strange place. He found the back of his ear covered in blood. As soon as Hogay walked away, the world world seemed to spin, and the cheerful, "good morning" greeting rang out from Dek. It turned out that he had implanted a microphone into the bone behind Hogay's ear. This was where sound could be transmitted directly. In addition, Dek also carefully installed a device that generated an electric discharge so that he could control Hogay. He even caused Hogay to explode in the blink of an eye. Dek even happily bragged about how he had taken care of Shuk-go after using him. Dek even deliberately contacted Song-sol to approach her. This was as a way for him to threaten Hogay. Dek wanted Hogay to obediently listen to orders if Hogay wanted the person he loved the most to be safe. The forensic team performed an autopsy on Inspector Moon's body. They discovered many fatal stab wounds, especially on the upper body. It was highly likely that the perpetrator was an acquaintance. He was determined to kill Inspector Moon face to face. Captain Park speculated that the perpetrator was Sun Jones because he was a junior whom Inspector Moon had trusted very much. However, he was simply a bomb carrier for the mastermind, and that mastermind possessed outstanding intelligence because he had set up the bombs with extremely high difficulty and had been behind the scenes coordinating everything. Do-ha, with his many years of experience, discovered an abnormality. While previous bomb explosions could be carried out from a distance, the most recent one had been detonated from a very close distance. In other words, the perpetrator had been present at that time. Hogay carried out his plan. He restrained Prosecutor Jung right in the court to get the access card. Sang-mol tried to find the vehicles that had entered and exited that area, even though the culprit had turned off all the cameras. Fortunately, Sang-mol found a new clue. Sang-mol had relied on the dash cam of the traffic police team on duty, and the camera had indeed recorded Sun Jones's image at that time. The police immediately chased after the location, but when they arrived, there was only an empty coffin left. Captain Park looked around. He decided to break the door of the opposite car to get the dash cam to help solve the case. The police confirmed that Hogay had been under the control of the bad guys. They even saw Hogay's extremely strange gait. The police tracked Hogay down. They even successfully rescued the prosecutor who had been attacked earlier. On the other hand, Hogay openly entered the prosecutor's office, but his fake identity was quickly exposed because Hogay had to face Prosecutor Jang's own subordinate. So Hogay had no choice. He was forced to knock out this subordinate and hide him in a corner. Hogay did not know that the police under the command of Captain Park were also there to search. The police confirmed that Hogay was the one who attacked the subordinate. Dek was still giving instructions from afar. He asked Hogay to hack into the police database. Hogay had to copy the data to a memory card, and at the same time, he had to delete the original that contained all the DNA of criminals in Korea in the past 10 years. Dek seemed to enjoy forcing the justice-seeking detective Hogay to personally erase the police's investigation efforts. Dek did so to free the criminals. Hogay considered it carefully, and in the end, he still made a decision that he could not go against his conscience. Dek seemed to have predicted this, so he went to Mung Bin's hospital room. Dek threatened to inject a mysterious solution into it that would quickly kill Mung Bin. Of course, he had to let Hogay witness the whole scene. Dek also mocked that Mung Bin's life was not as important as those databases. Hogay loudly asked Dek to stop. Just then, Song-sol appeared. Dek pretended that nothing had happened. Hogay had heard the conversation between Song-sol and Dek. Hogay knew that Song-sol still had full faith in him. He would definitely return with that criminal. Hogay's last request was simply not to harm Mung Bin and Song-sol. In return, Hogay had to do as Dek wanted. Hogay even took Captain Park hostage. This surprised everyone. Hogay then quickly found an opportunity to escape. Hogay ran away in the car he stole from the delivery man, but he quickly fell to the street because Dek had created an electric pulse through the device implanted in Hogay's ear. But he had touched a real mad dog. Hogay soon discovered that he had installed a hidden camera. He provoked Dek by swallowing the memory card he had always wanted. Dek tried to act okay, but his madness had reached its peak. Because Hogay had violated the law, the prosecution suspected Hogay of being the murderer and escaped. They immediately ordered a nationwide manhunt for Hogay. Although Dek injected Mung Bin with an overdose of sedatives, he was lucky to survive. But Sol did not suspect Dek at all. She even mistakenly thought that he had accidentally discovered the unusual symptoms and given timely emergency treatment. Hogay was a little surprised when he heard that he was wanted. He immediately contacted Do-ha via phone and made a mysterious request. Do-ha quickly asked for help from his close junior in the bomb squad. Do-ha had the device in hand and was present at the meeting point. Surprisingly, Song-sol also appeared there. Do-ha activated the jammer, so they had 4 short minutes to talk without fear of Dek hearing. In order to avoid Dek's suspicion, Song-sol quickly removed the implanted capacitor from Hogay's body. The contact device had to be kept to avoid being detected by Dek. Fortunately, Song-sol succeeded right when the time time was up, Dek immediately contacted and asked Hogay to be present at the meeting point. Hogay also left without hesitation. However, the person waiting there was Hogay's father. He had also been controlled by Dek beforehand. Chundong's mission now was to give Hogay the vomiting medicine. Chundong forced Hogay to drink it, or all the innocent people here would die. The situation was too urgent. Duha contacted Captain Park to request support. Meanwhile, Hogay had already vomited the USB. Hogay was both indignant and desperate. He did not want criminals to taint the law. Hogay hoped that his father would not stop him from arresting Dek's men. Perhaps that sincerity had moved Chundong's last bit of conscience. He revealed the location where he would meet Dek to hand over the memory card. Chundong also hoped that Hogay would definitely succeed in this last mission they had worked together on. As Chundong boarded the train, Duha rushed in to announce the shocking news that the headset Chundong was wearing was a secret bomb that would explode when it reached a certain height. This shocked everyone. Hogay immediately chased after his father. Meanwhile, the prosecution had also discovered and surrounded the place. Chundong had no idea what was going on. He slowly walked up to the upper floor. No matter how loudly Hogay called, he could not hear anything. The ticking of the clock grew louder and louder. Only then did Chundong realize what was about to happen to him. Hogay was also on the top floor. A loud explosion followed. The explosion made everyone shocked and speechless. Meanwhile, the station chief discovered that In Yu had also been present at the scene of the fire in the slum. He was the one hired to cause chaos and chase all the residents out of this place. The person who went with him was the last living witness to help the police reinvestigate this case. On the other side, Dek was also present from afar to listen for information. Son Sol felt like the whole world had been lost when she saw the body with the name Hogay. Finally, Hogay's body was taken to the forensic hospital. Junhong was the one who directly performed this surgery. Son Sol couldn't hold back her tears at this heartbreaking scene. She remembered every scar on his body that she had treated with her own hands. Dek even pretended to be humane and comforted Son Sol for this great loss. Then, he took her outside. During the examination, Junhong discovered a strange device implanted directly into the ear cartilage. Captain Park, who was standing outside, also witnessed this unbelievable thing. Mung Bin finally woke up. He didn't know that his body was in pain. Mung Bin immediately picked up his backpack and continued his unfinished mission. He couldn't believe that Hogay was dead, so when he saw the body, he could only sob in pain. Son Sol was probably the most heartbroken person at this moment. She innocently shared with Dek that she had never seen Hogay walk normally. His body always had many wounds during the process of solving cases. Although Son Sol witnessed the explosion, she still hoped that Hogay would return safely, but the outcome was completely different. She really wanted to take revenge on the criminal bastard who killed Hogay. Dek's face immediately changed and became mysterious. The information about the mysterious device was made public by Doha. That was the basis for showing that Hogay did not do it on purpose, but was threatened to do illegal things. All they knew about this mastermind was that he was sophisticated, professional, and extremely unpredictable. However, the prosecution still did not fully believe what Doha said. The prosecution gave them 24 hours to catch the culprit and clear the name of their late colleague. The only living witness who could give them a clue was Sun Jones. He was the one who helped Dek do bad things. Fortunately, Sun Jones' wife thought about the lives of her husband and child, so she provided the police with the address where Sun Jones was hiding. But when they arrived, Sun Jones had been killed by a fatal bullet. The gun taken from the scene was also confirmed to be Hogay's. Furthermore, the police could not find anyone else's fingerprints. This further strengthened the argument that Hogay was the culprit. Therefore, Hogay's investigation team would not be allowed to participate in the case to ensure transparency. According to forensics Junhong, Sun Jones's wound was caused by a close-range gunshot. Furthermore, Sun Jones died in a kneeling position, so Prosecutor John was sure that Hogay was angry that Sun Jones had killed Inspector Mun, which was why he took such a gruesome revenge. Mung Bin was furious when he saw Hogay being humiliated, but he didn't know what to do, so he just quietly sorted things out. Finally, he discovered a hidden camera hidden in Hogay's clothes. The police's task was to find it a place where Hogay fell off his motorbike. After a long search, Mung Bin found this precious thing, although it was not intact. Meanwhile, the forensic team was also working hard. They examined the soil left on the car that took Hogay away from the first explosion scene. They found a strange compound used to disinfect foot and mouth disease. Sun Mal checked the list of locations for establishing these disinfection centers. She combined it with the previous soil analysis results. Sun Mal quickly found a matching location. There was an abandoned building with no security cameras. It was an ideal place to hide and commit crimes. The data on the wiretap was also recovered. They discovered a video of Mung Bin's hospital room. It appeared right before Hogay erased all the DNA data data at perpetrator's request, so it was very likely that this was the moment Hogay was threatened. In other words, everything happened because Hogay wanted to protect Mung Bin. In addition, they also discovered Song Sol's figure, so it was very possible that she had met the perpetrator directly without knowing it. That also meant that Song Sol was in real danger. Mung Bin immediately contacted Song Sol, but the other end of the line did not pick up. Do-ha checked the cabinet where Hogay's body was kept, but it was gone. Everyone quickly decided to go to Hogay's funeral room. Sure enough, Song Sol was sitting there, quietly folding paper cranes, but she did not know that Dek had also come and was watching her from afar. He deliberately approached Song Sol with a cold face. Dek smiled triumphantly and confessed that he was the one who had injected the drug that put Mung Bin in danger. Although he did not do it himself, Dek had executed the perfect plan to kill Hogay. This shocked and angered Song Sol. He even arrogantly advised her not to do anything, otherwise Dek's violent nature would rise up. At that time, he would harm her other innocent teammates. So Song Sol should leave this place quietly. While Song Sol looked at him with hatred, a man crawled over with drops of blood on the floor. Surprisingly, this person was Hogay, who they thought was dead. But when he arrived, Song Sol was no longer there. There were only paper cranes left on the table. Although forced to leave, Song Sol calmly folded the crane and held it tightly in her hand. Meanwhile, Dek had taken her to his safe base. It was filled with Hogay's pictures and information. Dek even personally handed Song Sol a scalpel. He arrogantly challenged her to show her anger. She should kill him with her own hands that were used to saving people. Of course, a good girl like Song Sol could not do such a scary thing. Song Sol sarcastically called Dek a psychopath. He would forever lose and would definitely pay the price before the law. However, Dek was smart enough to understand that Song Sol intentionally scratched his neck to collect DNA. She did so to prepare for the worst-case scenario, which was when Dek killed her here. Therefore, Dek wanted to cut off Song Sol's fingers. The rescue team arrived at the abandoned house. Mung Bin recognized Song Sol's paper crane as the signal, so he quickly went in first. Little did he know that Dek had set up an extremely sophisticated trap. If Mung Bin moved, it could explode. Mung Bin trembled as he helped Do-ha find the bomb. And at this moment, Hogay also arrived in time. He quickly rushed in to rescue Song Sol. While Dek was still in shock when he saw Hogay come back to life, Hogay rushed in and continuously punched Dek. However, Hogay's physical strength had not yet recovered, so Dek took the opportunity to stomp hard on Hogay's severely injured legs. Then, he picked up a heavy object and hit Hogay hard, causing him great pain. On this side, Mung Bin tried to regulate his rapid breathing. He watched Do-ha's every move, but in this dangerous situation, Do-ha chose the simple way to cut the rope. Do-ha asked Mung Bin what color he liked. Mung Bin replied that whenever he wore red underwear, he would have good luck. So Do-ha immediately cut the red string, and luckily, the bomb did not explode. But they did not expect that there was still a fuse left. It was immediately detonated and collapsed the entire building. Song Sol woke up just in time. She used all her courage to slash the scalpel into Dek's back. Just as Dek was about to inject poison into Hogay, Song Sol was immediately restrained and strangled by Dek. Hogay used all his strength to temporarily knock Dek unconscious. He did not forget to carefully handcuff the dangerous criminal. Hogay breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Song Sol could still call his name. Dek was taken to the police station. Despite his bruised body, everyone greeted each other with a victorious smile and gestures of praise for their colleagues. Junhong questioned Hogay for once again hiding the secret that Saren was the murderer. But isn't it true that the fewer people who know, the more successful the plan is? Only now did Hogay calmly recount everything. It turned out that the explosion didn't kill Hogay. He had planned meticulously and coordinated well with the forensics. Hogay did this so that everyone would think he was dead. Even to prepare for the surgery, Do-ha used his connections to ask an acquaintance to create a mannequin that looked exactly like Hogay. Of course, there was the scar behind his ear, and the scars that simulated the remnants of the bomb explosion that led to blood loss on the rooftop. Despite their careful preparation, they still made a small mistake. Luckily, no one discovered it. The secret was kept until the last minute. In addition, Hogay knew for sure that Dek would attack his weak point. That was Song Sol. Hogay quickly made a plan to approach Dek, so he was able to catch up in time. After knowing the truth, Song Sol angrily left. She scolded Hogay for not caring about her feelings. Hogay bowed his head and apologized. But in the end, Hogay still kept his promise to Song Sol to return home safely. The two realized each other's feelings for them. They looked at each other with eyes full of love. Then, Song Sol took the initiative to kiss Hogay. The sudden kiss made him forget that he was in pain and even put down his crutches. On this side, Captain Park and the station chief met with witness Deng Sun. She was an employee of the construction department 10 years ago. The police had obtained a recording proving that the judge and the prosecutor prosecutor had collaborated with each other. They tried every way to push the residents of the slum away to build a potential new urban area. At this moment, the prosecutor and the judge could only put their hands in handcuffs. The fire department visited their colleagues who died in the fire 10 years ago. They also did not forget to pay their respects to the young man, Do-jin, who had just passed away. Do-ha quietly went to the grave of his best friend Do-jin. He expressed his endless longing and wished Do-jin to rest in peace. Dek, under the identity of Saren, was punished for murder and a series of health violations. Finally, he received a suitable sentence for his crimes. That was the ultimate punishment, the death penalty. Hogay also went to report this sentence to his father. He left a paper crane to express his condolences to his father. The tense moments were over. The first responders had a truly happy moment. Together, they put aside all their worries. Although the police caught the criminal, Hogay still had to face reprimand from his superiors because he had acted alone. Hogay was about to apologize as he was told, but when Hogay saw the paper crane, he changed his mind. He publicly declared that he had no regrets at all. Even if Hogay had the choice again, he would not change his decision to arrest that bastard Dek, because that is what an inspector should do. Hogay's statement received support and applause from everyone. Even his superiors gave him a thumbs up in appreciation of Hogay's unique attitude. Then the happiness was even more complete when the station chief and the captain officially got married with everyone's blessings. Even though today was the most important day of their lives, when the alarm went off, the station chief and the captain still ran to carry out their mission. They were truly first responders who deserved to be honored. The movie ends here. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.